Okay, everybody, welcome to week 7 in Methods 2. We are going to talk about clipping planes and making 2D. Okay, we are going to start with this demo model that has been loaded up on Canvas so that we all have the same content. So a couple of things about this demo model. We've got our topography here. We've got a building, a sort of masked out building that sits into the topography. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to do the same thing that your assignment is asking for, which is to cut a section and cut a floor plan of this file. So how do we do that? So the first thing we need to do is learn about the clipping plane. So what we're going to do is make a layer, a new layer. We're going to call it clipping plane. And let's put ourselves on that layer. And let's just see what happens when we use that command. So I'm going to type clipping plane. And it's going to ask me for a rectangle. So let's just draw a rectangle here. Doesn't have to be huge. And see what happens. Okay, so we drew that rectangle and the model disappeared. Now, if you look at this clipping plane, which is what we just created, basically, it is a plane that will tell you, here's my plane. So I will expose the model everything in the direction that this element is pointing. So right now it's cutting way down at the bottom of our model and it's pointing down. So it's showing us everything low. So the nice thing about the clipping plane is you can move it around just like any object. So let's use the gumball and let's flip this thing over 180 degrees. And see now this yellow part here is pointing up. So now we can see everything up above that model. Okay. So now let's see what happens when we move the clipping plane up. As we move it up, you see the topography starts to delete. So now we're seeing only everything from this point upwards. And what's important also to note is that this clipping plane is infinite. So it doesn't have to be exactly at your model. It'll show you everything in that infinite plane in every direction, right? So I can move the clipping plane around and it's still going to cut the same information, okay? So we can keep moving it up until everything disappears. And there you can see the building is just starting to disappear as the clipping plane process passes it, okay? So it's a little weird to go up from below. Let's flip that around again. Now we can see, here's our clipping plane. Now we can see what's more interesting, look at what's starting to happen, is as we use this clipping plane, we start to see the interior of our building and the floor plan. So if we cut it sort of lower, we're cutting through the pool. Here we're cutting at about that 3-foot height. If we keep going, we get to the second floor, we can cut through that. We get up to the roof, and then at a certain point, the clipping plane's not cutting anything anymore, right? So let's move that down so it's cutting through a floor plan. So there we go. Now we've got sort of a first floor cut. If we go to our top view, what we have to do is we need to make sure, let's put ourselves into shaded mode. Right now we're seeing everything here, but here we're only seeing the plan. So how do we get this top view to show the clipping plane? Well, so the key is that we have to do the command enable clipping plane. So it's enabled here in the perspective view, but it's not enabled in any of the other views. So let's just type that. So enable clipping plane is the command. And now you can see right there, you can see it cutting through. Same thing applies here in this view. We select the clipping plane and we enable it. Okay. Now we see it in different views. That's not so useful, but here we've actually got a nice top-down view. So remember this, we will use it again. But you can see the thickness of the walls. You can see the topography. You can see that pool and that stair. Right, so there's a lot of things happening on that. So that's a horizontal clipping plane. And what I can do actually right here is I'm going to name this clipping plane. Instead of just clipping plane, I'm going to call it horizontal. So I remember that that's cutting on a horizontal plane. Okay, and then if I want to turn the clipping plane off, I can actually do disable clipping plane. And I can select that clipping plane and then just click on it and then right click or enter, and it'll disable it. So it still stays here and I can turn it back on anytime I want. But that allows us to be flexible about how we're using it. The other thing we can do is, it's kind of this ugly element on the side of the screen here, right? So what we can also do is, if we want to have the clipping plane on but not see it, once we put it on its own layer, then we can turn it off. So we can look at the drawing without the clipping plane, but actually see the clipping plane enabled. And then when we want to enable or disable it, we have to turn it off and activate it. Okay? So that's a horizontal clipping plane. Okay, now that we've done the horizontal clipping plane, let's do the same thing. So the horizontal clipping plane makes plans. Let's do the same thing with vertical clipping planes. So let's make a new layer. I'm going to call it vertical. Obviously you can make as many clipping planes as you want. I'm going to put this on a different color just so we can tell the difference between the two of them. Let's do some hot pink. Okay, so I'm going to disable the clipping plane that we created, the horizontal one. So now I have my whole building back. And now I want to make a new clipping plane. I'm going to go back to full perspective view. So let's just use that clipping plane command again, clipping plane. And here we can do, the option pops up right here to do vertical. So let's just click on that, and then it's going to ask me for the start of an edge. So that's an edge there. And the end of the edge, we want to make sure that we're doing something horizontally. Otherwise, we don't want a clipping plane at a funky angle, right? We want it straight, orthogonal. Okay, so that clipping plane came up. Same thing happened as last time. It actually clipped away most of it. So you can see here, it's pointing towards the direction that it's showing. So let's just select it and rotate it 180 degrees. There we go. Now it's pointing in the direction that we want it to go. All right, so now let's see what happens when we move it. So as we move the clipping plane, look at that. It's cutting through our topography. And it'll keep doing that until we get to our building. And then look at that. It starts to cut through our building, and we start to get, what do we have here? A nice building section. Okay? So you can use the vertical clipping planes to cut sections through your building. And then just like the horizontal clipping plane, you can move this thing around. So we could rotate it 90 degrees. And I think we need to rotate another 180 to get it pointing in the direction we want. We can use this, and we can start to cut the section the other direction. Right, so they are flexible. They will allow you to move that clipping plane around however you want. Okay, so that is the vertical clipping plane. So let's rotate it. I want it cutting this way, because I think that is the most flattering cut through the model. Okay, so now we've got this clipping plane. You can see it's cutting through each of the topographies and anything it encounters. So again, say you wanted to shoot a view of this in Arctic, and you don't want to see that clipping plane, but you still want it there, just go into a different layer, turn that one off, and now you've got a nice clipping plane section. It's really a section perspective. Okay? All right, so that's the vertical clipping plane. Super easy, very, very similar to the horizontal one. Okay, so then we're going to talk about how we can control what the clipping plane actually looks like. Okay, now that we have our drawing in this clip mode, we want to go in and we want to see what we can do in terms of changing what that looks like, because maybe I don't want my section to be hot pink. Okay, so the way we do that is through display modes, and what we're going to do is we're going to create our own display mode. So if you look here, we've got all of these options. If you go all the way to the bottom, you've got display options. If you click on that, you get this Rhino options command, and right here you've got your display modes. If you click on display modes, you'll see a list of all of the different options. So I'm just going to start with shaded. I'm going to select that, and I'm going to make a copy of it. And if I look back here, I can see now I've got copy of shaded. I'm just going to say OK. And then if I go out here, I can go down to my new display option, copy of shaded. Right? Now what we can do is we can edit that copy. So let's go back to that display options. And now that we're in this copy, we can go in and we can change a bunch of things. So you can sort of look through this. There's a million different settings that you can adjust, but what we want is actually right on the very top, and then you take the scroll bar and scroll down until you get to the bottom, and you've got clipping plane objects. Okay, so let's look what happens when we adjust some of these things. So show fill. So right now we're talking about the fill at the clipping plane. So you can see here that that's actually gray, and what it says is viewport, so it's matching the color of the background. So we have a bunch of different options here. So planes material, it's just picking sort of a white tone. We could do solid color, and here you've got a gray. Let's just see what else you could do. So it could fill with a blue, right? So you can choose the visibility you want. I'm going to change it back to a dark gray because I'm classy. And then here we've got show edges. So let's toggle that on and off. So the edges are the lines of that cut, right? So you're seeing all of the slices of your topography in that show edges. Here it's taking the planes color, which is actually the color of the layer. We could change it to a solid color, so we can make it black. And then you can adjust the thickness. So you can see there, you can make it thin. These are just, instead of sizes, they're sort of a 1, 2, 3, 4. You can make it super heavy. Let's just leave it for right now at 3. And then you also have shade your selected plane. So let's toggle that on and off. And I think that is not really going to do much for us here. I think that is quite applicable in this section cut. So really the ones you want to edit here are the color and the fill. So if you wanted this to actually read without edges, you could change your edge color to the same color as your fill. So you'd still have lines, but you'd see them as strongly. So these are really the two items that you want to adjust here, the fill and the edges. So I'm going to change my edges back to black. And then I can hit OK. And then again, if I want to hide that clipping plane, now I have a nice 2D drawing, or a nice clipping plane color, right? And then here's the other thing is if you set this up the way you want it, but you're here at school and you want to move it to another computer, what you can do is you can select that display mode and you can export it. So go back to display mode, select it, export it, and then just save it in your files. And then next time you go to do Rhino, you could open it by importing it. So if I hit import, I could come back in, presumably I'm on a computer that doesn't have this, or maybe let's say I want to change it. Let's see if this works. Amy clip mode. So I click on that. Let's say open. The mode mode being ported already exists under another name. Do you want to replace it? That's because I didn't actually change anything in it. Just changed that file. But that's the idea. You can import and you can export. So you can move your display modes from one computer to the other, or you can just go in and make a quick change since you're not changing a bunch of stuff. Either way works. Okay, now that we have our section cut, what we're going to do is we're going to look at how we can create a 2D drawing, which is what your assignment is asking for you to create from the 3D drawing. So we have two 2D drawings to create, a plan, a site plan, and a section. Okay, so we've got the section created right now. So right now we're looking at it in perspective, but we also have front and left view. So let's see. If I'm looking at this, I can see that front view is going to be the best view for this for me right now. But what I'm also seeing is that my clipping plane is there, but it's not enabled because it's not cutting any section. So the first thing we want to do is enable it, enable clipping plane, select the clipping plane, and then everything is selected here. If yours came in and looked like your old version, you may have to come in and change your display mode to the new display mode that you just created. Okay. And now that we have that looking the way we want it, we're going to turn off the clipping plane. And then we're going to do a command that's actually going to take this 3D drawing that's set in elevation and make a 2D drawing consisting of lines out of it. And then we're going to edit that line drawing to create a nice section. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is let's select the whole object in the elevation view. And we're going to use the command make 2D. And it's going to give you a couple things. So it's telling you it's choosing the front view. That's what we want. And it's going to take that view. And then there's a couple things you could turn on and off. Like, for example, you could turn hidden lines on and off. But we're not going to do that. We do want our clipping plane intersections on. That'll show us all of these lines. And I think that is everything that we need. So let's hit OK. See what happens. Now this line drawing is going to show up in top view. So there it is. So see, you can see it on the ground here. So it projects it onto the ground plane. So let's just move it over here away from the drawing. And then let's shift to top view and see what we've got. So what you can also see is that when we did this, Make 2D created a couple different layers. So there's a couple steps that you have to do in here to actually make this a readable drawing. But let's see what we've got. We've got clipping plane intersections as one layer. Let's select objects. So you can see there, that's everything that that clipping plane runs through. So if we look over here, all those black lines, all those edges, those are on this clipping plane intersections layer. And then click here on curves. Select objects, all of those are on that curves layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to turn them in different colors. I'm going to make that curves layer red. And the clipping plane intersections, that can stay black. But what you'll see is I changed those layers, but none of those lines changed. And that's because the properties of those lines are not set to match the layer. So what we need to do right now is let's select all of this, and we need to change the object properties. So first, let's go into this rainbow round circle, the object properties, and that will pop up over here. So it's this rainbow circle. And what we want is everything, we're not going to set the layer, but what we want is all of these elements, display color, line type, print color, all of these, we want those to be by layer, so that we can control them the way we controlled the line drawings in the earlier assignments. Okay? Then we can make a couple different line weights, like we talked about line weights at the beginning of class, and use those to create the different depths that we need to create a good section drawing. Okay? So everything is by layer. Okay? Now we can see, look at that. So now we're seeing the section, anything that's being cut through is black, everything that we're seeing in the background is red. Okay? So let's go here to our top layer, And then we want to think about a couple of the things that we said were important in the section drawing to make things read. So let's just take a pause and look at that presentation. Okay, so going back to the drawing that we looked at earlier in class, we've got the building section with no line weight and then the building section with line weight. So everything that we're cutting through wants to be a heavy line, and things that we're seeing in the distance wants to be thinner lines. Okay? And then usually we try to make kind of create an outline on our drawing that is also a heavy line. Okay, so let's take a look at our drawing in that terms of those ideas. So right now we've got all of the clipping plane lines are on this black layer, and then all the lines in the distance are on this distance layer. So let's open our layers. Let's open our layers here, and let's rename them a little bit. So I'm going to call this heavy cut. So these are our cut lines, and I'm going to call this light distance. And now we need to go back to all that stuff we did in the very first assignment where we assigned print colors and print widths. So on any of these lines, we want them all to have black print colors. And then right now, our heavy cut is at 0.5. See how that looks. And then our light distance, let's change that to 1.3. We'll put that far away. Maybe we'll come up with a medium line in the middle. We'll see. So let's see how this looks when we put it into a layout mode. So let's just make a quick layout. It's all old hand. You guys are good at this. So we're just going to zoom into this. And then let's just do a quick print preview. Okay, so it looks pretty good, but things are a little bit muddy over here. We've got all these lines from the step topography, and maybe we want to get rid of those. So let's go back to our drawing in the top view, and we could take all of these intermittent step lines and we could actually go in and delete them. Some of them we might have to trim. But we could get rid of a lot of these lines, and then we'd have a nice clean section cut. Might have over deleted there. Actually, I move this so we're looking at this in full screen. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a singular section cut line here. So I think what we need to do is we need to trim each of these lines based on that one. So a little tedious. It shouldn't take that long. Maybe we can select a bunch at once. There we go. And let's ignore these stairs for the moment. We've got one more line that kind of hits those stairs. Let's trim it here. Okay. And then let's go back to it. Look at how that's looking. Okay, that already looks better. You can get rid of the rest of these bottom lines. Then we've got these going off into the distance. Let's get rid of these. Right, if we wanted to, stylistically, we could even come in and do something like that, where we just see the section line that cuts through the building. Let's look at how that looks. Print preview. That's looking better. Now I think we need to distinguish between the line that's actually cutting the ground and the line in the building. So I'm going to say heavy cut is the ground line, and then let's make a new layer called building cut. Okay, so let's go back to our print preview. So maybe let's make our heavy cut a little bit heavier. Even a little heavier than that. There we go. And then building cut. We're going to take all these elements that are part of the building and let's make those a cut line but a little bit thinner. So I'm going to go back from print preview. Sorry, I just realized doing that off screen. So the heavy cut, I changed to 1.2. The building cut, we're going to go in and let's change this to a blue and then change that thickness to 0.5. So then let's come in and grab these lines that are part of the building. So we're just selecting lines, holding down Shift to select a bunch of these. And we're not selecting the ground plane, just the building cut lines. And then let's just do change object layer. Okay, that's good. And let's grab all these little stairs because these are part of the building, as is this concrete. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Then here we've got a little bit of conflict between the topography and the building cut line and the stairs. So let's just clean that line up a little bit. I'm going to trim this line away, and I'm going to trim that line. Oop, not that one. That line away. Yeah, get rid of that ground line. Okay. Actually going to get rid of that ground line and change this line here to be a heavy line. So let's see how that looks. All right, that's looking pretty good, except we need to change our print color to black. Our new layer. There we go. I think I messed up here. We should have made that the building line and then brought that ground line across down here. Okay, so and we've got a little bit something funky going on there. Okay, so let's just fix a couple of these last things. Let's change that back to building cut line, and then here on heavy cut, I'm gonna do this. Run a line here, run a line there, I'm going to move the end point of that line across there where I hit the stair, and then let's take this line and change it to the light distance line. And then trim this last little one. Okay, so there we go. We start to have a nice distance line. so we can see where the building is situated. So there's some finessing that can go on here to make that tidier, but here's the topography in the distance. So one other thing I would say is that with all this topography, it's all these sort of stripy lines. I think it would be nice to see those as gray rather than black. So let's come in and actually make our print color of those gray. And then let's make that white so we can see it. So let's just change these lines that are the intermediate lines. Okay, and then maybe we need to do a little bit of trimming, or this is actually a good option for split. So if we use split and we let those trim lines cut it, then we've got two lines and we can change one side to gray, right? So let's do it again. So let's use the split on all of these. So split this one and this one. We'll split them with these two elements. Now we've got two lines. Let's select these lines, change them to gray. And it looks like just one more here. And now we've got, I'm just going to do this left-hand side. Now we've got a pretty good looking drawing there. So let's go to our section cut. And then let's just print this and see what it looks like in a PDF. And we want to make sure we're choosing, in this case, we want vector output because we don't have any raster stuff. And then we want that print color because that's what we chose. Let's just do print. And then let's see what we've got. Oop, those are construction drawings. There we go. So we've got a nice, we've got gray lines here, heavier lines here. This came out a little bit jaggedy. Let's see what happens if we do. See how they're rounded in here? Let's see what happens if we print that in a different view. Print. I think the raster actually, in this case, is going to look better. Now let's see. There we go. That makes a cleaner line. Okay. So I need to fix something here, but those topography lines look good. You've got kind of a limit and it's a nice section. Right? Yours will be more detailed because you've got more drawing elements, but that's going to give you your basic section. Okay, so let's talk about plan then next. Okay, so we did the section. Now we need to look at how we would do the same thing for a site plan. So what we need to do is we actually need to change from our section cut to our plan view. So let's go to our clipping planes, sorry. We've got our two clipping planes. We've got our vertical one. So let's take our vertical one and let's disable it. Let's disable it here. I don't think it's not enabled in here, so we're good. And then we can turn that off, that layer off, and then let's select our horizontal one, and we've got it enabled here, and we can enable it here. Excuse me. Bless me. So now we've got our horizontal clipping plane set here and our topography here. And then what we want to do is let's hide that horizontal clipping plane so we don't see it. And we're going to look at making a plan. So we're going to go work from top view and we're going to follow all the same guidelines. But what I want to do is I don't want to lose the work I did for my first section cut. So I'm going to rename this Make 2D layer. I'm going to call it Section Cut 2D. Now we can do a Make 2D from here, and we can do basically the same process. So we've got our clipping plane enabled, so you picked a nice section that you like. Let's go here, Make 2D, all of the same settings, just hit OK. Wait for it to finish, and then there it is. Okay, so now you've got your Make 2D of your clipping plane. Now we go through all of the same steps. So let's select everything, go to our objects, make sure everything is on by layer. Okay. And then you can see here we've got our new Make 2D. And let's just rename this Plan Cut 2D. All right, so let's look at what we have here. Look how good that already looks. So we've got our curves and we've got our clipping plane intersections. All right, so I mean, by doing the work on the first half, you've actually done a lot of this. So I'm going to call this, let's rename this Cut Plan. And let's that have a print width of, let's make it 0.3. And then the clipping plane intersections, so I did that backwards. Let's call that light plan. And we'll keep that on 1.3. And then this one is our clipping plane. We'll call that heavy cut plan. And let's make that, that'll stay at that 0.5. Maybe we'll change it. The other thing I want to do here is I've got all this topography and I actually want to put that on its own layer. So let's look at topography. Let's make that, in this case, let's make that the one that's gray. And then let's keep that at a, let's do 0.18, see how that looks. All right, so I'm going to come in, I'm going to, let's make this bigger. I'm going to select my topography, curves. So same, like I said, same process as before. So we've got all this nice topography. We make it kind of a lighter color. And this is the lower topography. All that topography up there has been cut through, so we can just leave it as a cut line. Just don't move things around. Okay, that all looks good. One more little bit. Okay, and then we've got our floor plan lines. So everything that's cut through is at 3 feet. So on your projects, you should have more stuff in here, right? And then everything that's not being cut through is at this sort of lower level. So that actually looks pretty good. There's just a few things we want to tidy up. We want to fix some of these elements because we don't, that may be how we modeled, but that's not how we would show a wall. So let's trim these corners so they look nice and neat. Trim where walls intersect. Okay, and then we've got our pool is here. We've got the steps going down. If you wanted to add a little bit more depth and line weight, you could. You could kind of create a medium plan, right? And that could be something between that 1.3 and the 0.5. Maybe you get like a 0.25, and you could maybe do outlines of different elements, like the wall is here is maybe heavier than the stairs. And that needs to go a little heavier. Again, print preview. So just getting that a little bit closer. Maybe that needs to get a little bit lighter. Okay. So you can play with the line weights, but can use the logic of line weights, edges, etc. Right? So then we've got our topography cut line. Everything here is below grade, and that looks good. So let's just go to a quick layout. Same thing, plan, cut. Make sure you put them in different places on your drawing. And then let's do a quick print and see what happens. How this looks. So same thing here. Raster output is going to give you nicer corners. Print color. And then let's see how that looks in print format. Look at that. It's beautiful. Okay, so that is clipping planes, 2D drawings, hatches. Oh, we didn't talk about hatches. Let's talk about hatches, and then we'll be done. Okay, so the last thing we want to look at here is how to do a hatch. So a hatch is basically a fill. So let's look at, we've got this building, this is a pool, and this is our floor plan. So let's say we want to, all this drawing's going to be white except for black lines. So let's say we want to do a hatch of blue in the pool and gray on the inside of our building where we actually have interior space. So let's get our layers up over here. And what we're going to do is in this, we're going to make 2 new layers. We're going to make hatch blue and hatch gray. Okay. And before we do anything, let's make their print colors the colors we want. So hatch blue, let's go in and pick a nice soft pool blue. And then for gray, let's do a light gray since our mid gray is our topography. So we've got a nice range of colors. We could also come in, if this were grass, we could do green. You want to be selective though, you don't want to overhatch. Okay, so let's go to our hatch blue layer, and I'm just going to give it a blue color so we can see what's happening. And I'm going to give this one that same gray color so we can see it. So hatch blue, we can just type the word hatch. And then it says select curves. So let's just select curves. The key to a hatch is it needs to be contained within a series of lines. And we're just going to use solids. There's some hatch patterns, but they're mostly pretty limited. But a solid works nicely. So let's just hit OK. Look at that. We've got a blue. Let's do the same thing with gray. So we type hatch. And then we just, again, as long as it's enclosed, so we're just going to select the lines that wrap that interior. Hit OK. So now we've got pool, we've got the building. Let's see how that prints, because it prints better than it looks in Rhino. So print. Look how nice that's going to be. Same settings, print color, definitely raster on this one because you need that raster to make those hatches work. Let's see what this looks like. And look at that. That's beautiful. Professional. Might have made that blue a little lighter. Overall, it looks great. So you've got your building, you've got your line weights. You can see some of these line weights read much better once you get it out into the building. So see how that light line weight, maybe this could actually get taken down to be a little bit thinner. That glass is actually way too heavy. So let's make a couple little adjustments and then print it one more time. So I'm going to go back in here to my top view. So let's take that medium plan, and I think we need to actually make these thinner lines, that medium plan, instead of that dark plan. Let's go back to from the print preview. Medium plan, let's make that a color where we can see the difference. We'll make that green. So let's do the medium plan here, and then just selecting these. So oftentimes the glass needs to be on the thinner line weight because it's closer together than the lines of a wall. Then I think we need to make the edge of this patio that light line also, so it reads like a nice edge. And then the stairs and the interior lines and the interior of the pool can all be actually not that line, can all be heavier. And then I'm just going to take down that, let's take that medium plan down to 3. You can leave it at 3.5. All right, I think that's going to look much nicer. All right, one last print test. Oh, see what I did? I made that medium plan green, but I forgot to change the print color to black. That's why the preview is handy. There it goes. Now, one more time, print. And then check it out. And that's the last one. That is nice. There we go. That's looking good. Okay. So that wraps it up. 2D drawings from 3D models. Thank you so much.